So we now have got our machine assembled, sitting in the cradle, and we're ready to start lifting. So at this stage you can switch the machine on, and when I switch this on, it's going to go through a short sequence, so I'll probably stop talking for a few seconds. So push for on. So every time you switch the machine off and on again, it's going to go through this sequence where the machine runs for 10 or 15 seconds. And for that reason, please don't switch the machine off and back on again between panel lifts. Switch the machine on at the beginning of the working session, leave it switched on until you've lifted your last panel, then locate the machine back in the cradle, switch it off and put it back on charge. But now we've got the machine switched on, I'll just show you the voltmeter. That's now indicating the battery level. On this particular machine, that's indicating around about 12.5 volts. And that's fairly typical for a fully charged machine. As you work this machine throughout the day, that needle will work its way down the scale, down to 12 volts and even slightly below 12 volts. And as I said earlier, make sure you put it back on charge once you've finished using the machine for that day. So we're now going to lift this out of the cradle. First of all, you need to remove the R clip, the back of the locking pin, pull the pin out, and that allows the machine to be lifted out of the cradle. So we're going to lift it out now. I'm going to bring it across and place it above we've actually got two short lengths of RW panel because we don't have a long enough panel, but we're going to simulate a lift with that. It's pretty obvious where these suction pads locate on an RW type panel. They're going to be the outer valleys of the panel. You lower the machine down so the pads are located on the panel surface. You need to be careful with the tension on the crane. You need to make sure that enough weight is transferred down onto the pads to make sure that the rubber seals are compressed onto the panel surface. But equally, you need to make sure that the crane doesn't lower the machine down too far so that the center of the machine will contact the panels. You need to be careful that it doesn't contact the panels. There's obviously natural flex on each of the extension arm joints, so the whole beam across the machine can sag down. So be careful of that. So it's enough tension lower down so that there's enough release of tension to make sure the suction pads are on the panel surface, but make sure you don't get contact with the panel from the actual machine. Now, in terms of panel balance, if you're going to lift this panel flat, you need to make sure that the actual machine is on the center point of the length of the panel. And with these chain configuration sets, that should always be the starting point. So we've now lowered the machine down onto the panel, and to operate suction, I'll show the lever on the side again, just slide the lever into the green zone. As I do that, I'm going to pan round so you can see what happens to the vacuum gauge. Waiting for it to finish, and I'm going to release suction to show you how to release suction. So again, you pull the pin, slide the lever into the red zone, and again I'll move around to the front and show you the vacuum gauge. So as soon as you operate that lever into the venting position, the vacuum will be lost and the suction pads will release the panel. For that reason, it's obvious that you don't release suction until the panel's located and retained safely on the roof. But please be aware of that. So to operate suction again, and I'll move around to the front. what you will have noticed there, as I operated suction, the vacuum gauge, the needle on the vacuum gauge, quickly rotated through the red zone into the green zone. When it went into the green zone, the red light and the warning sounder went off and the green light came on. At that point, you're safe to lift. The vacuum pumps continued to operate until the needle went beyond the 0.6 area into around about 0.75. That's operating in a safety margin, and what happens, you always get some sort of vacuum leak with vacuum lifters, particularly with leather grain or profile surfaces like this. And as the vacuum leaks down to a trigger point, the vacuum pumps will kick back in and pump up the vacuum to this sort of level again. So don't be alarmed when you hear the vacuum pumps operating. They're doing exactly as they're intended to do. Just be aware of the red light and the warning siren. If the red light's on and the siren's sounding, don't lift. If the green light's on, you're safe to lift. And I'm going to do one more little video. I'm going to release suction. I'm going to ask Neil to operate suction and I'll show you what happens with the suction pads. So I'm just going to show you the suction pads. The suction pads are in contact with the panel surface, but as Neil operates suction, you'll see the actual pad pull itself down onto the panel surface. So that was clear. The seal itself is being pulled down and moulding itself around the stiffening ribs. Now, if for some reason when you operate vacuum on the machine, the vacuum gauge doesn't rise smoothly, the chances are that one of these 4 pads will be an issue with it. It won't be seated correctly on the panel surface. So if the vacuum doesn't build smoothly, check all 4 suction pads and make sure that they're seated correctly and the seals are in close contact with the panel surface. Then the final thing you do, once you're happy and you've got suction, you can lift the panel. When it's a foot or so above the stack, you need to apply the secondary safety straps around the panel. We can't lift this panel for obvious reasons. We've got 2 panels together here, but there are separate videos showing how to apply the suction pads, the safety straps. And obviously, when you're maneuvering the panel onto the roof surface, when you're a foot or so above your purlins, you can release the secondary safety straps, make sure that they're clear of the panel joint, continue positioning the panel. When it's in position and retained and safe, you can release suction by operating the lever and pushing it into the red zone. At that stage, the machine can come down to the floor and you can pick up the next panel. So I'm just going to stop this video now and we'll go through some details on another video.